We are rolling, Tom.
Okay. All right. My name's Tom Harris. I'm director of the University Center for Economic Development, and part of our CARES Act funds was really looking at manufacturing. I think this is something we're always interested in the state of Nevada. This report's I want to talk about, kind of follows something I followed at the University of Wisconsin. They have a university center, and we were talking about manufacturing, and they said, hey, we did a study a few years ago, so I picked it up. And we're doing something peculiar for the state, and mainly comparing in the mountain states. Also, we're looking at occupational growth. What's happening to occupations? And I think it's kind of interesting about what occupations in manufacturing may be impacted by this new artificial intelligence, and even be technology. What we're worried about is being technologied out, for want of a better word. As you see there, the technical report is UCED 2020-2021, Report 12. If you want a copy of it, you can just send me an email, Harris, Harris, at unr.edu. I'll be glad to send you a copy. And also, if you have any, this is being recorded, and if you have any comments after the recording, you most certainly can get a hold of me. Let's go to the next slide. Like I said, the contributions came from two people here. One of them is Tessa Conroy. Tessa is at the University of Wisconsin. I've worked a lot with her. She's an ag economist like I am in rural issues. And they've done a lot of good studies at Wisconsin. And I was talking to her, and we decided I was going to do something kind of following what she did. It's kind of Fred Steinman had this economic summit, and there was every sector except manufacturing. He was saying he missed it. And so what we were wanting to do is allow them to have the looking at the manufacturing sector, which we've done here with us versus the mountain states. Frank Fossen is an associate professor, very good. I mean, this guy's productive in economics department. Fred has done a lot of stuff in enterprise on entrepreneurship. And also we've been looking at factors on artificial intelligence. I'll use part of his studies, and I've been working with him, is looking at not so much of how many occupations are going to be technologied out, but those occupations that may be transformed. And I think this is something we need to be very aware of, that we're going to have occupations that are going to change. And as we change, they need to be more productive. And so it's kind of two ways with this occupation development in the manufacturing sector. Let's go to the next slide, please. If the other thing is, these are the two things I've looked at. They did the state of manufacturing in Wisconsin. Has a little bit more down about the patterns of economic growth and those kind of things. And also I looked at Frank and another professor at Sorgen in Germany did a study on transformation. There's destructive factors in digital technologies is what we've been worrying about, but there's also transformation. We need to be aware of that, because transformation makes us very, very more productive. So I kind of combined these two into this kind of study that we're looking at as to manufacturing development and what manufacturing will happen. Hopefully give us insights. Oh, next one. Okay. Usually you hear me always saying, this is something I always preach about, is that the goods producing sector, employment wise, has been decreasing. This is a fact. This is a table that came from St. Louis Fed. The employment in manufacturing decreased from 37.6% of total non-farm employment in 1939, now is only 14.1%. However, this does not take in consideration productivity. Whenever we look at production or economic development, we need to be aware that there's employment and there's capital and there's technology. You can produce more. And as we've seen, we're doing this. In fact, during this pandemic closure, we had PPP loans. Yes, they kept businesses alive, but they also allowed businesses. A lot of this stuff was hanging around. They had Zoom at the university. We had a lot of this stuff hanging around. We were kind of worried about applying it because we didn't know how people would work at home. And people had already rentals in these businesses, and how would that happen? Well, PPP loans allowed people to experiment with this thing, and I think it's going to change the way we do manufacturing and other things, that it kind of gave us a cushion for those that might not have been experimented with. So these are different things that happen. But the main thing to remember about manufacturing, it's not here. It's talked about the value of production of manufacturing. The value of production of manufacturing is still increasing, and it's still the #1 industry in the US. Why? Because we can produce so much more with our productivity, robots and all this, as we've seen. Manufacturing is still the leading sector. It uses less employment, has to be very skilled, and how that would affect the state of Nevada. And I always talk about this. This is from Glenn Pulver. And it's mainly that increase efficiencies. We're becoming more and more efficient. We can grow more. I always say 4-H, make two blades of grass grow where one. Okay. And then I just say, Iowa State, we're looking at autonomous tractors and all that. We can grow more with less employment. And it creates efficiencies. There's an old thing that's done by the fellow that did something I think at Harvard. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but what usually took 40 hours in a week to produce something in the 1950s, we can do in 11 hours. So our productive capacity, if you ever look at so much greater, I look at myself as a professor. Well, I used to go to the library, pull out a card stack, look at the cards, get the call number, go to the librarian to get a journal article. I look at that journal. Oh, there's another journal. I go back. Now I just go clicking around. In about 5 minutes, I can get 50 articles. So we're becoming more and more efficient, even at service and other jobs that we weren't as when the other time. We also have increasing incomes and changes demands. Increasing incomes mean we consume more, and increasing and changes demand. What we need, what people need now are insurance and everybody wants internet that becomes a demand. I always look at people talking about what is affordable housing. In 1950s, I grew up in Arlington, Texas. I remember my father bought a new house in Arlington, Texas, a new development of a stick. It had talk about big, 840 square feet. Only 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and only in Texas would you buy something that has heat, natural gas heat, but no air conditioning. That would not go nowadays. But what has happened is that our incomes, our demands have changed of what we want to have. And so when I hear people talk about affordable housing or housing they want, the type of house that they're looking for is costly because it's more to it than it was in the 1950s. And so we've had this increase in changes in demand and going from services and a little bit more on manufacturing. Changes in the world economy. We are in a world economy with competing. A lot of my students are not just competing with somebody in Nevada and Texas for jobs. They're competing with somebody from China or Great Britain. That's occurred. There's a good study by a guy named Hernandez that looked at manufacturing employment losses. And he was concluding there wasn't really that much of a loss because of China. It's because job skills and how people can move around has really changed. Most manufacturing employment people are moving to manufacturing. They're highly skilled. They're moving to those. And so that has played an additional thing, as well as our trade with China and all that's been occurring. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a little different from what happened in the 1950s that are going on now. Go next one. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about manufacturing in the state of Nevada. In the U.S., manufacturing accounts about 12% of national GDP. That's gross domestic product. That's the value of production domestically. In 2019, Nevada derived 5% of its GDP from manufacturing, which is the 4th smallest of all states in the union. We were the smallest for a long time. And so we've come from a small base. But I know as most of us seen with the trick, we started increasing rapidly. That's one of the good things about it. Nevada's contribution to state GDP has risen through the years, which is contrary to the U.S. It's kind of gone down. In the mountain states, GDP, you get as New Mexico is about 4.8%. But if you go to Idaho and Utah, they're about 11.6 and 11.7%. These are also states that have budget surpluses, I should say. And so you can see there's a growth going on. Even though we're small right now, we have grown a lot. We have really in the last few years. And so that's what's kind of encouraging to me. One time I went to Purdue University to a meeting, flew in Chicago and drove by Gary, Indiana. All these old steel manufacturing places. I was happy that we're in Nevada where we can start and develop new manufacturing, which we have done in Trick, and I think also will happen in Lyon County here, in developing new manufacturing that will add to the state and become even greater and greater. This is an increasing part of our state as opposed to other states. Growth index here, this is growth index 1998, is where everything starts. The blue is Nevada. That's where we're growing really big. These are other states down here. Now, what we can look at is the Great Recession. Since this right here is the Great Recession, almost every state, I think every state had a dip. And we all knew that. We lost a lot of, there's about 25% loss in manufacturing employment through that time period. But after that time period, the state of Nevada has seen its employment in manufacturing increase about 57%. Beginning in 2016, right here, this is where the big growth has come, and it's increased. And I believe that's when a Trick. Now, probably, I know Roy and them will correct me wrong. This is where Trick came in, and we had Tesla and all, and we've seen a big increase in manufacturing. Again, as opposed to most states in the U.S. and the mountain states, we're growing. Since 1998, the states of Arizona, Colorado, Montana, and New Mexico have realized decreases in since let me back up. Since 1998, the states of the mountain states of Arizona, Colorado, Montana, and New Mexico have realized decreases in manufacturing employment. Since 1998, we've seen a 58% increase. So we've been running counter to the nation in many of our states here, and it's again, we started from a small base. And I think what we've seen is that we've had rapid growth, and we in Western Nevada Development District are in this big growth. And I think this is something we want to be cognizant of, that to keep this growth going. Shares, this is right here. This is metropolitan and non-metro. This is share of employment of manufacturing as to total employment. And this is right here is metropolitan. Yeah, well, okay, metropolitan is still growing. Metropolitan employment is kind of low, but still increasing. But you got to remember, when we talk about metropolitan, we're talking about Clark County, Washoe, Story is one, and Carson. Pardon me. We got this big gaming employment here also. But given that growth, they're somewhat steady. Our manufacturing has kind of gone the other way and kind of grown, and we've been either growing up right here to metropolitan. Right there's where Trick came in. You got to remember here also with the manufacturing rules, we saw some decreases in rules and in the non-metros. But during that time period, during the Great Recession, other things, mining is a big thing, and all the mining related industries. And so they kind of, while the manufacturing is also increasing in other areas, it is going to be, it's increasing almost in every county of the state. Pardon me. Okay. But here's what we talk about shares. These are differences in shares. In Story County, probably no surprise to anybody, 56% of the employment is in place of work employment is in manufacturing, biggest, followed by Lyon, which is about 12.1%. And I think Lyon is going to see even bigger. They're going to be a spillover and an increase. This is something that's it's in the Western Nevada Development District. We're in the area where manufacturing is increasing. I wish it would also be working down here in Clark County, because those guys generate a lot of our tax dollars. But anyway, as you can see, Western Nevada Development District is pretty much in these areas here, all the way down to Mineral, unfortunately Mineral. But you can see right here, we're doing pretty good. We're leading the count. We're leading the state a lot with the manufacturing employment. This is something that Western Nevada is leading in the state, and I think it's going to be for some time, because we have gotten that Trick. And I want to understand, Roy, please correct me, you're going to have expansions going on in Lyon County, which will also add to our manufacturing abilities. Non-metro growth. This is growth of employment here in the total employment in manufacturing, non-metropolitan. I was looking at the rules and how there's different. rules went up, and you can see right here with the index rules, manufacturing went down. Well, they really got impacted like everybody, the Great Recession. They're slowly going up. Now, I must say, non-metropolitan are all counties in the state of Nevada, net of Clark, Carson, Washoe, Story. All the rest of all the rest of the 13 counties. But it's showing that the non-metros lost a lot of employment, but they gained back in the manufacturing. I still think for us in the north, there's going to be the spillover effect that's coming over from this development and trick and what we got going on. Manufacturing growth index, see, that's where that thing is growing rapidly. That's figure 12. It went down, as we all know, the Great Recession. Then and then in 2013, we started getting back up. And look at that thing growth going up. The index has really grown up in 2013, 2015, it really took off. And that's our growth. That's the manufacturing growth in the metropolitan counties of manufacturing. Again, that's going to be attributable a lot with the Western Nevada development area where Washoe County, Story, and that whole area, and I think in lines playing into it. Now, in the text, just given our time, in the text, I do a lot more about what are the different sectors are growing and all that, because I want to talk about occupations and impacts of artificial intelligence a little bit more in this webinar. If you want a copy of the program, the paper, I'll be glad to send it to you, but I'll talk a little bit more about individual industries. But in manufacturing in the state of Nevada, about 3 sectors make 41% of Nevada's manufacturing. That's the electric equipment, appliance, and computer sector, the miscellaneous manufacturing sector. The miscellaneous manufacturing sector is one of those sectors that people don't know exactly where to put in. Our electronic gaming is in that sector. And that's a sector that's been IGT, those kinds of things. And the food processing sectors are big. If you go down the I-80 corridor in the west here toward Fernley or Fallon, you will see some of the food processing sectors. But those 3 manufacturing sectors make up 41%. Pardon me. And I talk a little bit more in the paper about that, but I'm going to skip that for a little bit more because of time, and also want some questions. Now, where I'm departing a little bit from the Wisconsin study, I want to talk a little bit about the impacts of automation and computerization. In a study by Frey and Osborne, they are saying that the threat of toward adoption of new technologies, the automation, they're talking about a threat of it. In other words, as people, some professions may be technologied out. That's one. That's what we're looking at. Frank Fossen has done a study with Sorgren when they talk about transformation. Transformation are those where all of us may not be technologied out, but we're going to be doing things differently. I was trying to figure out how to explain this, and the best I can think of is 5 years ago, I had a heart valve replacement. I had my 6-month review about a week ago with my cardiologist, and I asked him, I heard there's new things. The replacement, you didn't need to open me up now. You could go through my leg and put a new valve. He said, oh, where do y'all learn that? He says, well, we usually send 1 or 2 of our cardiologists to a school to learn this, come back, and then we learn it. In other words, everybody, to the high professions that may not be technologied out, the way they do things is going to be completely different. I look at my secretary, which we're calling administrative assistants now, what she did in the 1980s and now, completely different skill set. So I believe transformation is very important. And even for high tech and even day-to-day jobs, the ability to use microcomputers and make them efficient, even for sales, are going to be increasing more and more. So I see workforce development as 2 ways. One, those people are being technologied out, new jobs, but those who have jobs becoming more and more proficient. And lastly, I'm sorry, I have these allergies, is a study I got from the University of Indiana, which is who does Stats America. At this time when we first started it, you remember COVID-19 is very, very big, and it still is. What professions are the most vulnerable to COVID? I will tell you, now these are what I'm going to be doing here are only occupations in the manufacturing sector, but for those sectors that the most, it's somebody like oral hygienists makes sense. The medical professions, and because of their programs, they're the ones that have the highest. But we put that in there, and hopefully we can show as people become more inoculated, they'll free up these sectors from potential problems. Now, the this one right here this is automation. This right here is kind of a picture. The blue is the U.S. and the yellow orange there, the burnt orange is the no, the burnt orange is the U.S. and the blue is Nevada blue, of course. And you can see there's some professions here that we're hiring. They're having the potential of being automated out. Frey and Osmond did a study. They estimated that 73%, using this data, 73% of Nevada's manufacturing sector has an automation probability of about 61% or higher. Or also, if you want to look at it, 64% of our manufacturing employment has a probability of automation impacts about 81%. Now, that is concerning, that employment, but it's also one of the things that when we talk about a competitive economy, we have to be more and more competitive, more technology. You're going to be seeing more industries having these occupations. Some of them are going to have some technology, threat of artificial intelligence. That might mean those jobs are going to be changed. It could be changed how they're done it. And so that's another thing we need to be considering. What I did here, this is the highest probability of automation. These, and if you look, not very many of them have any of a higher education. Some of them have like some college degrees. Telemarketers about 99%. Well, you've been called on the phone by automatic computer people, and I don't like it either, but the probability of being automated is 99. These are data entry, procurement, these cashiers, as we've seen the cashiers, other things. These are the industries which are the top 15 in the manufacturing sector, occupations in the manufacturing sector that would have some technology problems. Only about 2 of the top 15 requires education above high school. Average salary is about $34,000. Average Nevada salary for manufacturing is about $58,000. So these are sectors that these are occupations that may see their way of doing a job threatened. And, we're worried, we need to worry about these people, these occupations, that these people may be trained to different occupations. But how about those that lowest probability? The lowest probability are those basically with lowest automation. 11 of the 15 require at least a bachelor's. Most of them are engineers, mechanical engineers, logistics, pharmacists, training, all of these, industrial engineers, civil engineers, chief executives, yes, because it still needs somebody, but very low percentage of being technologied out or having impacts. And so what happens, these are highly productive. And this is an area that I would talk about. If these people are not going to be threat of technology, they are going to be changed the way they work. And so to me, it is imperative that we have workforce, not only for people who would be technology, who are threatened by artificial intelligence, but those who could take the most benefit of it. Pardon me. I'm sorry, this allergies, but they're being technologied out. Now, it's not a very big, only 8% of Nevada's total employment in manufacturing and in these top 15, but they're very high paid, but they're very highly productive. And that's what's going on further. And so you can see these are the type of occupations. I'm looking at equal level of occupation trainings that will help people who are faced with artificial intelligence and those who are faced with transformation. Now, how about transformation? This is something I got from Frank Fossen, who is in our department. Frank has done a lot. Most studies have been looking at the destructive nature of artificial intelligence. We also need to be aware of the transformation. The way we do things completely different. Me, as a professor, in 1 week I had to learn how to do online teaching, how to use Zoom and all this. I'm sure all of you have learned the way you did things is completely different. And we are continuing to learn this. And we need to keep people who are in these positions trained, because that means productivity. Transformation, like I said, I think Frank would say, yields higher productivity. And when we're competing, we got to be productive. We found that 37% of employment in Nevada's manufacturing had a transformation of 68% or more. That means there's going to be some. You may have to learn a new. I mean, the thing people always ask me, how long I'm going to stay and retire. I'm going to retire when I had enough of a new Microsoft 8.0, different things. How many programs have we learned in our lives? And that's not only for manufacturers, but also for other folks in service sectors. Now, here are the top 15 with the highest probability of transformation. Look at them. They're mainly engineers. They're bachelors. Most of them have a college degree. Mechanical engineers, yes. Accountants. I heard now QuickBooks is outdated. How many of you have always heard, there's new programs. And so these are all these bachelors, masters, software. These are professions that are aligned with the high productivity manufacturing. And all of these, you're going to learn different things to do here. Even this one here, first line supervisors. They only need a high school, but the way they keep accounts, the way they keep people on track, you're going to have these workbooks. Who knows what other kinds of things? There's always new things coming out. Bookkeeping, all this. There's always a different program, isn't there? And so the probability of transformation, the way we talk about is transforming. One of the things I look at is, I live in Verdi, and we have our own local auto mechanic. And I went down and said, what happens if a Tesla car comes in here? He says, well, they're in trouble. Well, all of a sudden he's going to have to learn stuff. They're going to have to be learning how to do electric cars and everything. And so all of this is of interest. Now, they make on average $86,000, and they're highly paid individuals. That's because they're productive, but we need to keep this productivity up, and they're becoming more and more productive. And they're going to be, and as we see the transformation as continuing with manufacturing, even I should also back off and say warehousing. Warehousing, you think everybody's in there with a forklift. Not so. I remember Roy took us on a tour of some of the warehouses there in Fernley. I don't think most of the people know how high tech that is, and it is. It is, and so all people there have to be aware of it. 15 with the lowest. These are mainly people with not very many, not too much college education. They have an average salary of 36,000 compared to the manufacturing sector of 58. These are going to be transformed. They have a limited amount of transformation. Some of these are going to be technologied out, but these are some of them are skills, personal skills that don't really have too much technology. It turns out to be skill. Cabinet makers. But a lot of these, you can see right here, are going to be where you have artificial intelligence here is going to be a little bit lower than for our engineers and others in that high tech group. The top 15, like I said, this top 15 here make only about 3% of our total employment, but they are highly productive. I mean, these are the Tom Brady's, and so they're high productive, and so they're going to have to be more. This here is going to be a combination of, I believe, of people who have faced technology and worries of technology, but also, even if they can overcome that, they're going to have to learn more and more new skills as things go on. Everybody, and it's going to be something of where artificial intelligence and using things are going to be more and more in this. Then lastly, what we did was look at COVID. COVID, when this thing started, was rampant. There was no vaccination. And this came from the University of Indiana, who does Stats America. We work a lot with. And Nevada manufacturing had a higher group of occupations, manufacturing occupations that were COVID related than the U.S. And so what this means is that we get inoculated and all, we kind of put that at the bog. Over 56% of Nevada's manufacturing employment had 61% or more probability of being infected with COVID by that, just the way the occupations and the way the skills are, face to face and that kind of stuff. The 15 highest, well, you can see the 15 highest, and I think it has no surprise to anybody. The 15 highest occupations: consumer representatives, medical, like I said, the highest, the occupation with the highest COVID related is dental hygienist. Most medical do, and most medical have the PP, I think the PPP, I think they call it the protective equipment. Dental lab technicians, those kind of, but this is in the manufacturing. And if you can see, most of it's face to face. And down here is frontline supervisors. Again, they're being pretty high technology, but they're also doing face to face. And so, yes, these were worrisome about a year ago, still are to some degree, but as we become more and more inoculated from COVID, so much better. Here are the lowest probabilities. Good old mathematicians, most people who can work at home, those kinds of things, and those have the lowest manufacturing salaries of $42,000. They make up about 20% of our of our manufacturing employment. These are the lowest ones. Again, all of us, about 2 months ago, I got my 2 shots. Most manufacturing, most of these occupations, as we get lower. So we don't have to worry about that COVID thing. We can worry about people who are worried about technology, and those are being transformed, make them more productive. In this case, we don't have to worry about that COVID as much as we did. It's going to be interesting with the vaccines. Now, what I did lastly, this are the 15 occupations in the state of Nevada by number. In other words, these have the highest. Electric, this number 1 up here, electrical, electronic, boy, this is quite an occupation. Electrical, electronic, and electromechanical assembly, except coil wire tappers and finishers. That's the highest in number of employees that we have. They have a high probability of automation, kind of medium in transform, and a kind of median here in COVID. The largest numbers account for about 93%, account for a lot of our employment in the state. I was going to come down here to Frey and Osborne did a study nationally, and they're predicting that 97% of the manufacturing jobs are going to be replaced by automation. That's a lot, isn't it? And so we have to be aware of that. Now, I don't think it's going to be totally replacement. It's going to be transformed too. What people, like I said, what the secretary was just typing is not the secretary we see today. They have a lot of different skills. And so somebody who may be in these higher laborers on freight, stocks, and materials has a high probability of automation, but they're going to be transformed maybe in some way. The thing I was trying to look for is where is my first? Yeah, right here. General operations managers, a very low probability of transform automation. Pretty medium, pretty high on. They're going to be transformed because of they're still going to have to be bosses, but they're going to be not just collecting data on where people work and how they work. They're going to be using computers to follow up with people, making supplies. What are we having problems right now is our supply chain, how become better with supply chains. And so these people are going to be, are in our number 1 right here, pretty high in employment. The probability of COVID, again, was kind of high because it's face to face. But again, I think with inoculations, they make pretty good money. And so what happens, these are people here that where we can get them better trained to use more and more efficient technology, the better they are. The one up here, yeah, 1, 2, 3, the fourth highest, the frontline supervisors, only about a 2% automation. That's not surprising. You'd still need bosses, and you'd still need those folks. And so their probability of being technology down is lower, but their ability to be artificial, the probability of being transformed is kind of high. They're going to have to be learning more and more skills. And you can see here, their probability of COVID was kind of higher than all the rest, but that's because they do more face-to-face operations. But again, as we get finished with more of this technology being teaching on transformation, the better. Now, this is where you can get in contact with me. I have more information on the trends, who are the number of trends in manufacturing by each economic sector. We need to be, like I said, we need to be aware of manufacturing. Let me back up. I'm doing an extra study. There's 2 other studies I'm doing. We're finishing one on the accommodations and gaming, how they're being impacted, and we're doing one on the medical profession. So those are 2 others we're doing. But for the state, for manufacturing, the state of Nevada as a percentage is low, but we're gaining. In fact, we're as we've seen, our manufacturing sector is becoming more and more employed. That's one of the benefits and opportunities that we had. As to Nevada occupations, we need to be aware of this technology. I know we're doing workforce development, but also we need to do skills and those who are not going to be technologied out to improve their skills. COVID-19, as we get it under control, we don't have to worry about it. We'll become more productive. And so I'm going to end it there. It was about 30 minutes, and I appreciate your time. If you've got any questions, I'll be open for it, Bob. So go right ahead.
All right. Anybody who has questions, feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you. All right. Going once. Going twice.
Hello?
Yeah, Bob.
No, this is Roy Edgington.
Roy. Okay, Roy, I got somebody. Yeah, go ahead, Roy.
So I was reading an article on aging, and they talked about how, Europe's been complaining for 2 decades, and now Japan, the last decade and a half, about their aging workforce and the struggles. And they were talking about Korea, which surprised me. A lot of Koreans are not having children because of the difficulty of getting housing, the difficulty of getting jobs. And so and they were talking about some of these countries they're going to be 1 out of 4 will be over the age of 65. And that workforce will obviously be older. We're seeing that even here with the construction workers, the average age is like 50 something and stuff like that. So while automation moves forward, that was one of the things they were talking about in Korea, is pushing automation. The government it's tried to push birth rates, and they've gotten nowhere in the last 10 years. So now they're looking at other alternatives. One of the things they're looking at is automation, and up into including robots for soldiers. I mean, that's one of the things they're, looking at, autonomous vehicles, autonomous soldiers. Maybe you tie one to every live soldier, and so while automation scares me on one hand, I'm almost come to the conclusion that with the workforce changing, with the world changing, we're seeing less and less birth rates in a lot of countries. That will probably have to pick up the slack that we need. Is that a fair assessment?
Roy, you got a good point. I agree with you. The one of the interesting results of the COVID-19, there was supposed to be a lot of births that didn't happen. It's one of these things that we've seen. That's why I call demographics. Demographics is a slow and boring data point, and we all know we're getting older and older. We've heard it for 30 years. Guess what, people? It's really hit here. Yes, to make people work more, and probably our way we work. People will not retire completely. They can work with computers and they'll be doing things like that, working less. And yes, the computers are going to push people to do things. When I hear industry saying they can't find workers, what that means is that there's going to be a push in engineering and others to substitute capital for employment. And so, yes, we may not have as many pickers. I know at Cal Davis, they're working on things on picking tomatoes and everything with robots. Necessity is going to cause that. So that is going to be, it's going to be two things there. I think you're going to see, because of the age, you're right, you're going to see more automation. But those who stay in the workforce may be older, may not be working 40 hours a week, but also will need to be trained a little. This is where I've talked about this continuously training thing. You just don't go 4 years of education and quit. No, I don't think so. We are going to have to be trained. And so those of us who remain in what's called retirement in 20 years may be completely different looking than what we've seen before. And I agree with you. Necessity is going to necessitate invention, and that's what's going to happen. Very right.
Hey, Tom?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, Mr. Don.
Hey, in your study, did you look at how much people can make if they fix the robots?
No.
You know what I mean? That's the logical conclusion. I should learn to fix the robot.
Well, that's true. I mean, there's going to be a job there. Now, remember, there's different occupations. Lisa, I got you next.
Sorry, Lisa, I jumped in.
There's, that's Don Bader. Anyway, there is always, no robot can fix that. But anyway, we have what new occupations. Gosh, I mean, I talked to you. I mean, I was sitting watching TV. There are these social media transformers or initiators.
Influencers.
It's influencers. I never heard of that job. And so there's going to be a job for robots. I agree. I guarantee you. What that's going to look like, I don't know. There's every 5 years, the Department of Labor and all of them change the number of sectors. They change the occupations. There's always interesting how new occupations occur. And these things like an instigator, 3 years ago, I never heard of it. I still don't know exactly what it is. Maybe I don't really want to know, but there's new jobs always coming out. Right. There's going to be somebody operating a robot. Lisa, is that all right, Don?
Thank you.
Yeah. Lisa?
Yeah, Tom, I was just wondering, from the local government perspective, because manufacturing is important to the state, it's important to so many of our counties. And you talk about the transformation in many of these jobs that will need to occur. So from the local government perspective, what do we need to do to help begin to support those programs or training programs that need to be available for our businesses when these kind of transformations start to happen, to prepare that next workforce?
Okay. I believe community colleges are going to have more and more active place here for people to learn to become not only, not just to be a person who operates how to operate robots, but for you to be a bookkeeper, there's going to be new programs for you to learn. I think that's going to be one of the things with local governments. They're going to work together where we can increase community colleges there. And where I came from, Oklahoma State, they had these vocational technical schools along with their community colleges. Those are going to, I can see those training people to do more and more things. And it's going to become more and more evident. I think that's something that we're going to see. There's going to be a push in the Nevada system, higher education. Yeah, you're going to have your 4 years. I buy that, all that. But they're also going to have this thing where people go to school, after they graduate, going to have to become new people. Like old Don brought up, where would you go to learn to be a robot mechanic? Well, that's going to open up. And so I think you're going to see more and more of those things. Local governments may be, I know there's some changes going with NSHE with the community. You may see more local control. I don't know if that's, I don't want to get in that mess. But anyway, it's something that's going to happen. It's going to have to happen, because I see community colleges, or VOTEC schools, I like to call them, that they would be helping local people to address these new changes. True enough.
And one other question, Tom. So, I often work like with the CTE program at the high school.
Oh yeah.
And,
Yes.
they're always struggling to get their pulse on kind of the next jobs to kind of help train, the high schoolers in those CTE programs. Where do we point, the CTE coordinators, et cetera, to kind of get their pulse on, the information in the future as it relates to manufacturing?
Follow the data. I mean, that's a hard one. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, talking to Don, I'm going to group this: instigators, these social media instigators, is what you call them? Influencers?
Influencers.
But
Where
we
do
like
you get
instigator.
that? Instigator, okay.
We're liking that.
Where did that come from?
I like instigator better than influencer, just for the record.
But anyway, it's just something like that. And they're going to have, maybe they'll be on top of it or maybe behind, but I know there's going to be things. I was talking to somebody in California, the guy was with diesel mechanics. And I said, Elon Musk says in 5 years, we're going to be all electric trucks. Where's the training here? And it's hard, when you forecast in the future, two things: you can forecast, you can be correct, or you can be incorrect. And so that's what they're looking at. And hopefully that they're getting their programs where people in the future may have these new, I can see there's going to be a lot more things opened up. And the pulse, see what the economic data is telling you, and what the industries are telling you. And it could be something like robot mechanics. I'm just using that as an example. But it also could be how to use social media. I mean, these young people, I use young people to teach me how to do social media. I'm still trying to find what is it? There's this one key, I forgot. Anyway, I always look for something that they have so much more skill than me. So yes, they have a hard job, a very hard job.
Thank you, John.
This is Roy.
Oh, Roy, hey.
I'd like to go back, circle around back to the robot. I remember a few years ago we had the economic development, seminars, and one of the speakers talked about what's the German company, Siemens?
Yeah.
And they were talking about in Europe. So you have a robot, you have like three things that can go wrong technically. You got electrical, you got mechanical, and you got a programmer, right? So there's three people, he says. So you got an electrical engineer. So what they've done is they've combined all three of those set skills into one class. You go to school for 4 years, and that's what you do. And so they're already ahead of us on that. They already have that skill set in Europe. They're looking at that because of as much automation as they've done. So they've already set that bar. We're just, I think, now starting to catch up to it. So yeah, you'll go to school and you'll learn a little mechanical engineering, a little electrical engineering, and you'll learn computer programming, because that's when you look at one of those things, that's the one of the three problems that you can have with them.
It is, Roy, kind of interesting about the whole makeup sometimes of what is a complete occupation job, all occupations that come into it. I was talking to a cardiologist, and I remember I had a cousin had to get a pacemaker. The electrical engineer didn't show up that day. They need electrical engineer in the operating room at the same time. So it's some of those, what you have this. That's why you have this manufacturing sector. What are all the different occupations are under this thing that make it go? And that's going to continually change. But you're right. There's something like the robot is just not lubricating the wheels. It's a lot more to it. And that's where the CTE people have to, I know they do a great job, but that'd be a hard one to keep up with all the different types of various skills you got to have for something just like a robot. But you're right. I agree with you. Des, did you have a question?
A question and a comment. Story County was mentioned a number of times in your presentation as doing well with regard to industry and manufacturing. So too was Lyon County. Lyon County showed up quite in blue in that early map. And yet Lyon County, as I recall, during the Great Recession and even more recently, stands out as quite high in the unemployment figures. So it's a bit of a disconnect there, which I don't quite understand. And certainly if it goes more for automation, and it's going to even show higher in unemployment. Is that not the case? People will be put out of work if you have more automation. So what's the future of these counties that are doing well in terms of manufacturing if there's high unemployment at the moment?
Okay, what happened there was in that time period, 2008, we had that unusual recession. There was high unemployment in Lyon County, but the type of manufacturing it's going to change, and its manufacturing is influenced by unemployment rates. So if the national economy goes good, there's going to be some impacts on unemployment rates. But it's going to be an area where you see more economic development going into different areas. Lyon County now, I would bet, Roy, it's kind of interesting with this supply chain stuff going on. It's really been a crisis. Those are singular points are going to be when we start increasing the supply chain development. And so, yes, it does. Some industries are very, what we can say, cyclical to the national economy. Some are counter-cyclical. And also where you step up to in what has happened in the case of Lyon County at one time period, a lot of it had to do with housing and construction losses. And you have to look at the whole economy, and manufacturing did have some losses, of course, but I don't see it as big as it's going to be impacted, yes, because it is part of it is cyclical with the national economy, but not to that big degree. Lyon County had a big influence because not only did Lyon County, remember, unemployment rates are a place of residence. So when people live, a lot of people, I think, I could be wrong on this, Roy, but almost like 20%, a big number of employment in Lyon County are working outside of Lyon County, moving back to Lyon County. So when the state government lays off people, Lyon County gets impacted. When the casinos and some stuff in Washoe County get impacted, it's back to Lyon County. But how much is that is place of work employment that's impacted by Lyon County? It's kind of like getting the data and feathering out what's the influence of place of work employment and place of living employment.
So, Tom, how do we track when you say unemployment in Lyon County? I'll give you a good example. So I have a sheriff's office that's 15 deputies short.
Oh, yes.
Is that considered, do we track that? Does unemployment say, okay, we lost 15 jobs that we haven't filled? NHP is a good example. Certainly it's supposed to have 8 NHP troopers, right? A sergeant and 7 troopers, or 2 sergeants and 6 troopers. I don't remember what it was. It was supposed to be 8 people. Today I have 3 on duty for the whole week, a sergeant and 2 troopers. Now I have, according to the major 2 weeks ago, 3 young men or 3 individuals that are now going through the academy, but I'll still be down 2. Does that show in unemployment?
No. Unemployment, what happens, unemployment rate is developed on labor force. What they calculate is the people who have been actively looking for work. If you're a kid going to school, you're not in the labor force. If you're retired, you're not in the labor force. And then they look at the labor force, and then people who are in the labor force who have a job, and this is what we call place of work, where they're working or not working. It really doesn't deal with potentials. That's a different statistic we need to take a look at. But
so how do we look at that?
I would say that is what I'd call a labor supply study, where you talk about opportunities for labor versus, let's say I have positions. Well, you have 8 positions, nobody's there. So I'd have to call that a labor supply study, what you want to look
So
at. So
what
unemployment, I think unemployment, unfortunately, is being used for too many things, which is not intended to be used for. And unemployment, just that, I see, I don't think there's anything recorded in Dieter that shows the maximum employment that could be in this firm. That's our problem. That's where we do independent labor shed studies on that. Right. If you ask, and I know you and everybody here has been on, you ask people, they can't find any employees. Well, that's not put in the unemployment rate. That's just, uh, those are vacated. That's an employment analysis. I wish Bob was on this. They get some stats on that EMSI stuff on that.
Because where we're having a problem is we've consistently short one engineer for the last 3 years. We have 4 positions and we cannot hire an engineer. I from what I understand, the city manager said that they looked and there was like 600,000 engineers positions open with nobody to fill them across the board.
That is a problem we have these days. It has to do with demographics and also has to do, like I always said, I wasn't on maybe Des was on where I was on this. A guy from the Federal Reserve said something I thought was very profound. It's easy to freeze economy. Remember, we just shut everything out, but it's hell to thaw it out. And what we're doing, we're slowly thawing it out to where we can start hiring more. And of course, you're faced with budget constraints and all that. And I know at the university, we have a lot of positions that are unfilled, but we can't fill them. We don't have the money to fill them. That's the other thing. So it's one of these things. Once the economy gets going, you can unfreeze these positions, and hopefully we can start hiring more. It's kind of like a potential. What you're talking about there is kind of potential employment.
Thank you. Tom, I just have an interesting tidbit to share as it relates to manufacturing and COVID. I was talking to a couple of manufacturers earlier in the month. And, at that point, there was no social distancing required, no COVID protocols required by the state, but they kept all of that in place. And the reason why is because their vaccination rates, although they didn't have exact data, they had a sense, one of them, that only 10% of their workforce was vaccinated, and the other that about 50% might be. But they felt they needed to keep those COVID protocols in place to ensure that they could meet their production goals. I thought, oh, that's kind of an interesting, thing to kind of pick up from what's out there. And it'll be interesting as we talk to manufacturers going forward to see what kind of numbers they're seeing in their employment populations who actually do decide to get the vaccine.
Good point. We're just starting on this. This COVID, what it impacts. I had I was at a university under mask, or somebody we were talking medicine, and we talked about something like this. You remember AIDS? Somehow we think AIDS has been cured. It has not. It has been kind of quashed down so much with all these medical things that it's almost eradicated. It's kind of, even I saw a thing I was watching Dallas Mavericks playing basketball. There was some ad on there about it, and they say, you take this medicine, over-the-counter medicine, everything's doing all right. I think we may see that with COVID. We may not have full eradication, or we may have annual shots, but we're going to trample it down so much that it's almost, in 5 years, maybe just a memory. But right again, the thawing out process. There, as manufacturers get more people and they find it, this is something that's going to have to be discussed. I know there's personal liberties and all this, how that might interact, because we don't want people to get sick because it influences the productivity. And so I can see it's kind of a sticky point, but it's one of those things that's just one of the difficulties of thawing out this economy, I think, with COVID. He brought up a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. How many, we're thinking about, I think that students have to be vaccinated before they go to school here at UNR. That's another thing. I don't know. Some may or some might not. So it's a question that's going to be going on until we tap this thing out.
All right. Any further questions before we say goodbye today?
Like I said, I have a copy of this thing and a copy of this report, and I'd be glad to send it. In fact, I'll send it out to everybody who's on here. I know Des and others have it. It's got other things in there. I talk about STEM. I talk about a lot of things about what you're talking about, Roy. What age groups are in what occupations in the state. And so it's kind of, I didn't go into that because I'm glad that we had time to talk. And so I brought up a bunch of, I didn't know there was social media instigators or whatever they is. But anyway.
Well, I'd like to make one comment before we go.
Yeah, Roy.
We went through Trex right after, just before the recession kind of started coming back. I went and saw those guys, and something that really shook me was they had not laid off, although their sales were down. They had managed to survive. And the one gentleman told me, he says, there were 13 companies that made this. There's only 8. So it was pretty profound for me to think, okay, there's 5 communities that lost unemployment, those jobs are gone. And that plant is closed and the building's being sold for something else. While Trex is in the process of expanding today as we speak, and constantly hiring, and I've watched their salary go from 12 to 15, from 15 to 18 to 20, $22, all within probably the last 8 years. They've made some big jumps in salaries, and yet you still can't buy a house on that salary. It reminds me that even if we're successful, somebody else, someplace else isn't. And so they managed to live out the recession, and they still can't keep up with demand. So they're expanding. We're seeing expansions. They got a bunch of building permits in and stuff. If they want to put on another line, they just came to the Rotary and talked to us about what they're doing and stuff. And it was pretty positive. But I remember there were 13 companies and there's only 8 now, and they were one of the 8. And I, just by the grace of God, our community didn't lose 112 jobs, which is now 140 or something. So
that's something we all have to be cognizant of. I know as economists, we always talk about free trade, but we forgot to talk about the impacts of free trade on employment and some things that some people have lost their jobs and what we need to do to retraining them. And that's true. I will agree.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all for being on this. Good questions, and I hope you found it information. And I'll send you a copy of this publication. And I will say I have 2 others being developed right now, not on manufacturing, but also one on the gaming and the accommodation sector, and one on the medical sector. As you can guess, the accommodation sectors are really impacted by artificial intelligence. So anyway, thank you, Bob.
Bet. Thanks, everybody. We'll get a video of this up in the next week or so.
Thank you, sir. All right. Bye-bye.